Hey guys, it's Elsianna here, and today we're going to be looking at Mr. Nightmare. We're actually going to be watching two different Mr. Nightmare videos in this episode, and the first one is 3 disturbing true crawlspace horror stories. Now, if you guys don't know what a crawlspace is, it's basically a place in your house where like you hide things, basically. No, or basically you hide things. It's like, or, it's usually in your basement, but it can basically be anywhere. It's usually in the basement, though. So anyway, is it on? Yes. Alright, let's get right to it. Story 1.
My house doesn't have a basement, and a lot of houses that don't have basements have crawl spaces instead, which are basically a layer of space under the lower level of a house with a height of no more than about 5 feet, usually used for storage. It started on a night like any other. I had classes the next morning, so I had to be in bed early. My room is on the first floor, and the crawl space is right below my room. After turning off the TV at like 11, I started hearing noises below me. Actually, it sounded like it was coming from right under my bed. My parents and brother were all asleep by now, so calling for any of their attention would be a little obnoxious at this point. I took a little courage, but I got on the carpet on my knees and looked under the bed, hoping I wouldn't see a rodent or any other kind of creature. There was nothing, though, so I got back into bed. As I got back into bed, though, the sound started up again. It was kind of a rough push and pull kind of sound. It sounded like something being done deliberately. I once again got on my knees on the side of the bed and looked underneath.
Sounds like saying sighing.
There was definitely nothing under there, though.
Sounds like somebody sighing.
Enough, every time I got out of bed, the sound stopped. I went to get my dad, and he took a look under the bed, too. Figures there were no sounds now, though. He told me he'd check the crawl space the next day to see if one of the pipes were leaking or something.
Sounds like somebody's sawing.
Something in the crawl space.
Sounds like somebody's sawing into something. Or breathing, like,
so
really weirdly.
When I got home from class the next day, I spotted something sticking out from under my bed. I pulled it out, and it was a bag full of old papers from, like, elementary school. I planned on asking my mom why she would put that in my room, but I figured I'd just throw it back down in the crawl space and forget about it. Our crawl space has its entry door inside of our garage. My dad tends to leave the garage door open a lot during the summer months. This was so he could work in there without having the lights on while also getting some fresh air.
Right.
Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to sounds coming from below my room. Not my bed this time, but for some reason the sounds were especially clear this night. I knew now something had to be in the crawl space. After turning on my bedside lamp, I ran to get my dad out from bed, who was a bit irritated that I'd woken him up. He led me down to the garage and to the crawl space door. He opened the door and grabbed a flashlight that hung next to the door. As we looked inside of the crawl space, however, we noticed something strange. Light. Across the other side of the area. Light was seeping in from above. But that made no sense. There weren't supposed to be any holes in the floor. My dad crouch walked his way to the hole. And then he screamed. Hearing my dad scream with such fear and horror was the most disturbing thing I'd ever witnessed. I didn't know what he saw, but he screamed at me to open the garage door and get out of the house. I listened without asking questions. I stood in the driveway waiting. I heard a commotion inside of the house, including a scream from my mom. 5 minutes later, my dad and older brother came outside.
Supposed to be black ones.
5 minutes later, a police car pulled up to the house, and neighbors soon started coming outside to see what the commotion was. Let me explain what happened. When my father got to that hole in the ceiling of the crawl space, he realized it was a giant hole cut open right under my bed, and as he looked through it, he saw a masked man looking down at him. As my dad grabbed at the man's arms through the hole, he screamed for my older brother's help, who luckily came to my dad's aid. Without him, my dad could have easily been killed, because that man was carrying a handgun.
Wow. So that noise we were talking about, yeah, it was the guy sawing under the floor. Maybe sawing a hole to get into the kids' room. But that scream kind of got me. It was like, ugh. Nick was like, whoa. Well, that was loud. I didn't cover the thing because I didn't know. I didn't know it was going to play sound. Okay. Okay, 1 sec. I need pillows. Okay, that's not going to work. It's stuck. Unicorn pillow. Ta-da. The power of my unicorn pillow.
When I was 21, still living in my parents' house, my bedroom was actually supposed to be considered an extra room. It wasn't built with the intention of being a bedroom, more so a kind of downstairs storage room. However, I was the youngest, so I got the worst room. My 2 older brothers had already moved out by this point, and I was finishing up with college. It was winter break, however. My dad was on a business trip, and my mom was in another state with friends. They're the kind of parents who you never see around. They've been like that since we were kids. My room happens to attach to the crawl space of our house. There's a little pull-off door in the wall. When I was little, my brothers always teased me and said there were aliens or monsters in the crawl space. Sometimes as a kid, I'd get scared by the littlest of noises coming from inside the wall next to my bed. Eventually, I outgrew that fear, obviously. I was chilling in my room, just trying to finish up all the work for my classes, when I heard some muffled noise coming from the crawl space, like literally beyond the wall right next to my bed. It wasn't any kind of thumping or tapping or anything. It just sounded like some kind of sound that would come from a person's mouth. Of course, my heart started racing as I started freaking out over it.
No, it sounds like an electronic
Given that I was
voice.
home alone, I couldn't just call for my huge, intimidating dad to go in there. So I opened the door to the crawl space, and with my phone's flashlight, just aimed it in every direction in the crawl space while still standing by the doorway. I wasn't sure exactly what I was looking for. But after not being able to see anything or anyone for the doorway, I contemplated going deeper into the crawl space. But just then, there was a voice.
Was I making sense there? Hey, sometimes I talk too much, but let me tell you something right now.
After nearly having a heart attack, I realized it was just one of those old talking Bubba toys. I didn't know what could have caused it to go off and start speaking, though. I was guessing it was deep in some old bag of toys somewhere, and something was putting pressure on the trigger button. I waited by the door for the talking to stop, and when it finally did, I shut the attic door again and got back in my bed. When the time came for me to go to sleep, I turned off my laptop and the light and rolled on my side. It wasn't long after that I heard the talking Bubba go off again inside the crawl space. Now that I knew what the sound was, it seemed much clearer. This was the last straw now. I had to get that toy out from whatever bag it was sitting in, where it would probably be going off all night. I went back to the crawl space door, and this time actually went inside. I followed the sounds of the toy's voice. As I got to the big brown paper bag that seemed to be containing it, I saw 2 arms come out from the dark. 2 arms that were stretched out forward, and there was a horrifying deep scream that accompanied them. It was being lunged at. I screamed as I ran to the crawl space door and slammed it shut. It had a lock on it, thank God. A couple seconds after locking the door, there were bangs on the door that consistently came about every 2 seconds. The door didn't show any signs of giving, but I didn't stick around to find out if it would. I was upstairs already on the phone with the police, but I did notice the banging stopped downstairs. The police told me to wait either inside a locked room or outside in a safe place like a car or a neighbor's house. I didn't want to be in the house anymore until the cops arrived, so I took the spare keys to my car from the key ring and went to sit in my car. I had a view of the back section of my house from the street, however, and noticed a door on the side of our house was open. It was the outside crawlspace door. It was completely wide open. It suddenly makes sense how there could be someone in there. The outside door must have been left unlocked by my dad by mistake. I sat in my car telling 911 to hurry up before the intruder could escape. I didn't see anyone leave through the door, but for all I knew, they already had left. The cop car finally came roaring down the road with its lights on.
Oh God.
It stopped in front of my house.
Okay, he's not alone anymore.
I got out of the car and called at him to follow me to the door. I pointed and said, "In there," and he went inside with his flashlight. I peeked my head in there the whole time, helping out with the flashlight too. I made sure he didn't miss anything. I even suggested that he search any big boxes or bags, and he did. The officer was surprisingly patient and polite towards my demands given the situation. He came out after a few minutes of searching and assured me the crawlspace was empty. Whoever was in there left in a hurry. The crawlspace door could only be locked with a key or from the inside, so I asked the officer to wait there while I went inside and locked the door from the inside. As I was in the crawlspace again, alone, I couldn't help but shake the feeling that I was being watched as I hurried back to my room to lock that door as well. The officer left a few minutes after, and I tried to get to sleep, but I couldn't. I was awake all night until the sun came up, just worrying about someone still being in that crawlspace. Luckily, no one ever broke into it again, but I guess I wouldn't call it breaking in, since the door was unlocked.
Wow.
100 years ago, more than 650,000 Canadians paved the way to peace. Honor the one.
This is a story of Remembrance Day.
It was 2016. I had just signed a lease to move into my first house alone. It was a fixer-upper starter home for sure,
Oh boy.
but the neighborhood wasn't bad at all, really. By the first day, I had the house layout memorized. By the third day, I was settled in. However, by the fourth day, I started to hear some weird house noises. There was a small upstairs where the 2 bedrooms and a bathroom were. The first floor was just the living room, dining room, and kitchen.
Right.
When I was upstairs, I never heard the sounds. However, when I was downstairs, I'd start to hear noises come from below the floor at later hours of the night. There was a small basement, technically, but it was just one little room meant to serve as a laundry room. I went down there to see if the noise could be coming from down there. There was no one down there in that room, but I could still hear noises coming from inside the wall. I felt around the wall to see if there was any kind of hollowness, and in fact there was. That meant there was some kind of room on the other side. I looked to the corner of the basement, where there was a small opening that went deeper than the rest of the room. I went over to look at it, at what I assumed to be just a tight space that could be used for storage, and learned there was actually a door in that tiny opening. A door that seemed to lead to some kind of crawl space area. I opened the door, which barely cleared the tiny opening, and looked inside, but it was way too dark to go in there. Plus, whatever the noise was seemed to stop. I could tell just based off the very front of the space, however, that the ceiling was just tall enough to walk under, maybe with a slight crouch in your step. There was no way I was looking around there at night anyway, so I shut that door, went upstairs, and unlocked the basement door just in case, you know.
Good.
I called it a night shortly
It's a
after.
good idea.
The next few days, things were normal. One night, I heard a sound or two when I was in the basement doing laundry, but I was starting to think it was just some kind of noises that had to do with the boiler system or whatever. The next night, however, while I was in the living room, I heard thumps hitting the floor. 3 distinct thumps, actually. Now my adrenaline was rushing, as I was positive I had someone in my house. I went into defense mode and grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I had and stormed downstairs. I tried to make myself angry as I approached the crawlspace door. I turned on my flashlight, opened the door, and started screaming with anger, or what I wanted to seem like anger. But really, I was shaking in my own skin as I entered that dark, cold crawlspace. It was completely empty, except for what seemed to be 2 empty boxes. I must have done a complete 360, analyzing the space at least 5 times, and I knew for a fact there wasn't anything or anyone in there. Then, however, something broke the absolute silence. It was a sound that was coming from no further than like 20 feet away from me. It was the sound of breathing. In a panic, I looked in the direction of the breathing. I was horrified to see something standing in the corner of the space. I didn't know what to think, but I knew it couldn't be a real person, because I had looked around at least 5 times and saw nobody in there just a second ago. As I stood there, frozen, I started to feel like the figure in the corner was getting closer to me. That's when I ran for the crawlspace door. When I made it outside, I looked around for something to block the door with, but found nothing. So I ran upstairs and locked the door. That night I went to sleep at my parents' house, and the next day I harassed the landlord to let me out of the lease, given what I had just experienced. It took a lot of arguing, but I managed to get out of that house within the same week. All that week, however, I stayed out from the basement, but I did continue to hear noises from down below when I was in the living room.
Wow. That, I didn't like that at all. I don't know which one of those stories, those crawlspace stories was creepier. I think that I honestly think, I don't know. I think maybe the first one, because that's... Thanks for that, computer. The first one was actually the worst for me, because, like, that was, like... It actually showed... Like, you had sound effects there, you'd scream. Okay, so I think the first one was scariest. Okay, this next one, I'm gonna put some more pillows on this. I'm gonna gather all the pillows I can find and make a stack, because, like, it hurts to hold my arm up like this. Oh, so much better. If only I could find my selfie stick. Oh. Okay, this next one is called 3 Disturbing Real Food Delivery Stories. One sec. I'm kind of trying to move my hand out of the way. 3 Disturbing Real Delivery Stories.
I work as an Uber Eats driver at night to make a little extra cash. Friday and Saturday nights are always the busiest because everyone's either home or with friends and ordering food. So those were usually the nights I would work. I got a request on a Saturday night at 1 a.m. to pick up McDonald's for a guy named Kyle. He lived a few minutes away from my current position. So I punched in the nearest McDonald's, which was like a 2-minute drive away, and picked up his order. It was a small order. I think he only wanted 2 hamburgers. He lived like 5 to 7 minutes away from the McDonald's. I followed the app's directions to the house, and eventually it led me to a short dead-end street that veered off another dead-end street. The house was the last one on this dead-end road. It sat right next to a line of trees that ran alongside a highway that was pretty much dead at this hour. Given how late of an hour it was, I didn't want to ring the bell, so I called this Kyle guy's number. It rang once, then went to voicemail, so I hung up. Then I got a text from him, though. He told me to come to the door, and so I did. I got to the big wooden front porch of the house, and soon the front door opened. A bald guy opened the door, and he didn't look very old. He looked to be in his 30s, yet his head was completely bald. Maybe he was sick, or just liked that look, so I didn't judge. However, his breath was disgusting.
My uncle was bald at like
He seemed
20.
quite drunk, so that was a little off-putting. The payments were done through the app, so usually there was no need to wait around for money. But this time, this Kyle guy asked me to come put the pizza on his kitchen table while he ran to fetch a tip. I didn't object to free money, so I waited in his kitchen, which, by the way, was only lit up by a small outlet-sized night
Pizza?
light, so it was pretty dim in there. The whole kitchen smelled rather disgusting, though. I didn't know what it was.
Okay.
Kyle was taking awfully long
There's a
time
dead body in there.
fetching this tip, so I started to wander a bit. I stepped into the living room, which was adjacent to the kitchen. The TV was on in there, which was the only reason I could see anything. However, the stench was even greater in this room. Then I noticed that the back door was slit half open. Maybe he was airing out whatever that putrid odor was. For the hell of it, I walked to the back door, expecting to get a quick breath of fresh air.
It's a dead body.
The smell only got worse. Then, finally, I stepped outside onto the man's back deck. I heard flies. The sound of a swarm of flies, right by the door.
It's a dead body.
Then, I guess a motion-sensing light saw my movement and turned on, revealing 2 big black garbage bags stuffed with 2 long objects. The smell was unbearable, too. It took me a second to catch on to what I was most likely looking at. Suddenly, waiting around for the tip didn't seem like a good idea anymore. I went back inside and rushed to the front door. And just then, I heard Kyle emerge from the basement calling to me, waving a few singles in his hand. He
Get
saw
out of
me
there.
as I was about to open the door and asked where I was going.
You can't trust Kyle. Get out of there.
I had to come up with something. So I said I was just rushing to check if I had something in my car. He said, "Oh, okay," as he came over to me and handed me the bills. Then he turned to the back door, to the porch, where the light was still on. Then he looked back at me, with his gummy smile now disappearing. He asked me in a firm voice if I went to his backyard. I told him no, and he just stared at me, not saying anything. I didn't give any fucks anymore. I opened the door and walked myself out, but not without him grabbing my shoulder as I got onto the stoop. I yanked his hand off my shoulder and ran to my car. I saw him run back inside with the front door still open. I turned my car on, but I sat and watched his front door, curious to see if he'd come back out, and he did. He came back out, running full speed for my car with a big metal rod in his hand. I drove away from his house, ready to call the police and report him. I called when I got down the block, making sure to leave him no time to dispose of those potentially dead bodies. I waited down the block and saw police cars pull up literally within 2 minutes. I watched the whole thing as I told police where to go. In fact, Kyle, if that's his real name, had already started moving the bags, which did contain dead bodies, to the bushes in his backyard. Everything about this guy was off. From leaving the back door open to reveal dead bodies to a pizza delivery boy, he may have been deranged, but he also wasn't the smartest man around.
Exam story 1. It is. Okay, what? I thought he picked up some hamburgers from McDonald's. What? Now it's pizza? That was a quick jump, guys. That was weird. Yeah. The first thing he said was he went to pick up McDonald's for this guy. And it was hamburgers. Like, where did the pizza come from? Did he magically make the pizza appear? Because they said it was hamburgers. It's creepy. Okay. I mean, I don't care, honestly, I don't, but it's weird. It's just weird that. Okay, let's continue.
The compact car needed a revolution. Inside and out.
Sorry about that. Now let's continue.
I deliver food for an Asian eatery in my town.
Uh-huh.
It's the best gig I could get at my age, simply for the tips alone. My friend and I work there together. We're actually the only two who aren't Asian. My friend usually works the counter and takes phone calls. I usually do deliveries, and that's the way I like it. My friend got off the phone during one night shift.
Do you see we're the only two that aren't Asian?
Delivery. After the food was prepared, I was handed a brown paper bag, and I was off on my way. The address I was given led me to some small dirt driveway off the main road, onto an enclosed property. Don't picture it as some luxurious private property, though. It was some old, unkempt excuse of a property. And the house seemed to be closed off, given that there wasn't a single light on in there, and how high the grass was. I called my friend back at the restaurant, and he gave the phone to our boss. Unfortunately, our boss is a stitch, so he yelled at me in his thick Asian accent to knock on the door and don't waste the food. I got out from my car and felt grass rubbing against my shins. That's how tall it was. I went up the 3 stairs to the front door and knocked really loud since there didn't seem to be a doorknob. As I expected, after 30 seconds of waiting, there was no answer. So I got back in my car The first thing I did was start texting my friend back at the restaurant.
Right.
But when I looked up back to the house, this time one of the upstairs lights inside of the house was turned on. So I went back to the door and knocked once again. Only on the first knock, the door pushed open slightly. Someone had opened the door, but there was nobody standing next to the door. I pushed the door open a little more and called out hello. My voice echoed through the empty house. I was waiting to hear footsteps come to the door. They never did. Obviously, someone had to have opened the door, so if they weren't going to come to the door, I had to assume they wanted me to come in. I stepped into the house as my shoes made the wood floor creak. I called out one more time, and this time someone replied back. I heard the word aquí arriba. Now, I'm not fluent in Spanish by any means, but I knew that aquí meant here, and I knew arriba meant above, so I put two and two together and figured they said up here. There was a stairway in the middle of the hallway, so I walked over to it and stopped at the bottom step. I looked up the stairs, and all I saw at the top was an arm reached out over the ledge, doing a little stiff come here motion. I used what little Spanish skills I'd gained from middle school and said something like, Tango tu comida, as I walked up the stairs. As I got about halfway up the stairs, the arm wasn't there anymore. I got to the top, looking for whoever was just standing by the ledge over the stairs. Then I noticed through the tiniest amount of light that the person was now inside a bedroom, lights off. I didn't see the actual person. Once again, all I saw was the person's arm, doing that same come here motion. It's as if anything above the person's elbow was faded to black in that room. It was such an eerie sight. I knew for certain I wasn't going in that room, though. So I said firmly with confidence, Buddy, I'm not going in there. You come out here with money or I leave. Suddenly, the arm pulled away into the darkness of the room ahead of me. I was standing there in silence. I was hit by a flying object. It happened so fast that it took me a few moments to realize I'd just been hit with a stiff, severed arm. It wasn't some plastic Halloween toy. It was a real arm. I ran down the stairs with the food still in my hand and got back to my car. I didn't even call my friend or my boss. I drove straight to the nearest neighboring house and rang that person's doorbell. When they answered, I told them about what their neighbor had just done to me, and the woman had the most puzzled look on her face. She said nobody's lived in that house for a year. I felt my stomach drop when those words hit me. She said she would call the police after we talked about it for a good 5 minutes. Then I went on my way back to the restaurant with the food.
Right.
I explained the best I could to my boss, and he let it go. I sometimes wonder how things would have played out if I went into that room, and who or what I would have found.
This is a story, baby.
I used to work at Domino's.
Yes, I turned
at 3 a.m. on weekends. And being that I was
My
taking
brother
it
works
off
at
here
Domino's.
during college at the time of the story.
And yes, I
Always threw me on the 9 to 3 a.m. shifts.
did turn up brightness a bit.
There would always be at least 3 people working that late. One to cook the pizzas, one to take orders, and one to do any needed deliveries. This night, the one cooking the pizzas was Jeff, a 28-year-old Italian guy who worked 2 jobs. He was always in a bad mood, so when he told me to deliver something, I did it without complaints. So, being a Saturday night, it wasn't uncommon to get calls for deliveries past 2 a.m. Around 2:30, I was told to deliver 2 pizzas to an address that I still vaguely remember. 27 Crocker Drive, or something close to that. I took my stupid, beat-up 2002 Honda Civic up the road for 5 minutes.
Right.
The only main road that cuts through our tiny-ass town. I live in the Manchester Township area in Jersey, containing a whole lot of nothing but trees everywhere. My drive there was a dark one. After merging off the main road onto smaller roads with no streetlights, the only light that could be seen for miles were my headlights. I turned off the public road onto a dirt road with a private property sign posted outside. It seemed I had arrived to the house I was delivering to, when suddenly I heard a bang reverberating through my car, followed by a weakened sense of handling of my car, as well as a repeating flopping sound. I knew for certain I'd just got a flat tire. I stopped the car at once and got out to confirm the front right tire was completely flat. I could see through the headlights that the house was walking distance from my car, though. So instead of calling my insurance company, it would make more sense to deliver the pizza and also ask that person for help. I got to the deck of the house. It was an average-size house, completely enclosed by trees, as were most of the houses around here. The lights were on inside, but all the blinds were shut. I rang the bell, and quickly a normal-looking young man answered the door. Before exchanging the pizzas for money, I told the man about the predicament I just found myself in. A look of concern came over his face as he handed me the money and I handed him the pizzas. He came outside to take a look at my car with me. It was a 30-second walk from the house. We got to my car. He started analyzing the tire. He said he could help me. He would just need his tools from inside. I started questioning what I could have hit on his dirt driveway, and he yelled out to me, "Don't worry about it," as I was walking down his road. I walked a bit further, kind of ignoring him, when I noticed a spike strip in the road. A very small one, but undoubtedly what I hit. I couldn't see any other reason for that to be there, other than him putting it there deliberately. I started thinking over the possibilities of what could be going down, so I pretended I didn't see the spike strip and walked back saying I didn't find anything. He looked at me. I was worried he might have been suspicious. But then he turned away and said he was going inside to get some tools. God only knows what he meant by tools. I waited for him to get to his front door before I got back in my car, turned the car on, and threw it in reverse. I was not sticking around there to find out what he was doing. I heard the flat tire wobble on the dirt road as my car slowly rolled in reverse. I made a point of avoiding the spike strip this time. As my car pulled out of the private dirt road onto the concrete road, I took one last look down the man's driveway to make sure he wasn't following me, then I took off. I couldn't drive too fast, though, and risk of damaging my wheel. I stayed at a steady 10 to 15 miles per hour.
Good.
I looked in my rearview mirror and saw something behind my car. The man running after my car. I had no choice but to step on it, forcing me to cringe as I could literally feel the damage being done to my wheel. The distance between my car and the man got greater until he was out of sight. After turning back onto the one main road that I'd mentioned earlier, I slowed down the speed a little bit, back to 10 to 15. It was a long ride back, about 20 minutes since I had to drive slow. When I got back, the place would be closing in 10 minutes, but I had to return the domino sign that they make us put on our cars when doing deliveries. Jeff was upset with me that I took so long, until I told him the whole story. The woman who was also working the same shift as us listened in with a look of shock on her face the whole time. When time came to close, Jeff told me I should just drive home slow since I lived like down the block, and that I should take care of it tomorrow. The two went off to their cars and drove away. I sat in my car for a little bit, thinking. Eventually I turned my car on and started my slow drive back to my house. I noticed, however, that a car without its lights on was following close behind me for a while. So I pulled over in front of some small house to see if they would do the same. The car passed me, but then pulled over on the same side of the street a little further down.
It's the man.
I started to panic, knowing it had to be the man, who figured that he'd find me at the Domino's that he ordered from. I couldn't lead him to my house, so even though I didn't know for certain if it was him, I had to be overly paranoid and call the cops. I had police come to my exact location for fear of being followed. After 5 to 10 minutes of waiting, a cop car slowly rolled down the street, and I beeped my horn to stop him. He stopped in reverse so that his windows were lined up with mine, and then we both rolled them down. I pointed at the car in front of me with its lights off, sitting a little further in front of me. But just then, that car zoomed out from its parked position, lights still off, instantly disappearing down the road into the night. The cop put his lights on and sped after him without saying a word. I didn't know if he wanted me to follow him, but I couldn't with my tire, so I drove home as quick as I could and parked my car in the driveway. I still don't know if that cop caught that driver. Somehow I doubt it, but I like to imagine he did. Either way, I always made sure to watch my back every time I drove home after that night.
Right.
And I quit that job 2 months later.
Good. Yeah, okay. That was the end of both videos. I enjoyed it. I don't know which one's my favorite, I think. The scariest one in that one, so the first one I said the scariest one was the first story, which was the only one with the sound effects, so. Which, with the crawlspace one, I said it was the first story that was the scariest. And the food delivery one, I think, as creepy as it would be to find a dead body in the street. Also, in case you're wondering, let's see if there's like a lever or something on this. No, there isn't. In case you're wondering, I do have a new chair, so explains why I'm higher up. I think the scariest ones for me, the scariest videos for me were, the first one, the crawlspace horror stories, and then it's between the third and I think the second for me in the food delivery. As scary as finding a dead body is, I think getting hit with a dismembered arm and you don't actually see who did it, that's creepier, I think. So, like, he got hit with a legit dead arm. Just like a dismembered arm. So that's creepy. And then, the guy who deliberately put a spike there for fast food delivery people, it's creepy. And the fact that there was a car that pulled up a few minutes after him with its lights off, it's like that's the man again. It's like, no. I enjoyed it. It was okay. Like, they didn't make my heart race or anything, but a couple of them did make me look away. It's like, nope, can't do it. So, if you guys want to watch the original videos, because I know it's hard to see on my phone, if you want to watch the original videos, the links will be in the description down below. Oh, so please take a look at that. Take a look at the original video and subscribe to Mr. Nightmare's channel. Or the link will also be down below. Oh, also like this video and subscribe to my channel. Oh, and click the bell for notifications. And I will see you guys in the next video. Oh, have a nice day, guys.